Thanks for coming. Number 5. I understand you requested to be for Star Trek V. Was there a reason for that?
I was requested?
When given a choice of which movie you could show up for, apparently you chose number 5?
Absolutely not. It was what was left. Choose this one.
Fair enough. William Shatner, perhaps? Well, that brings up an interesting point. A couple weeks ago, we had Ralph Winter here, and I was talking about all the movies, and he talked about when they were making Star Trek 4. You're gonna pop up? Okay. When they were making Star Trek 4, you know, he and Leonard and I assume yourself, everyone kind of felt like it was working, you know, and that I think he was saying, you know, everything was falling together and it was coming in under budget even. And then he said on 5, this one, the phrase he used is they were smoking their own press releases. And you know, did you get that sense between 4 and 5 of while you were making it, 4 was working and 5 wasn't working?
Well, I knew that 4 was working. When I read the script, I knew that 4 was going to be a terrific film. It had everything. It had everything that you could want. It had this, not only was it a fast-moving story, all the characters were, you know, were highlighted. We went back to our initial objective in the television series of making a, you know, a social comment that was, you know, significant. It was great humor. It was great action. Star Trek V, I don't know what I thought exactly. I know what went wrong with Star Trek V. I don't know if I had, obviously I didn't have the foresight to know there would be problems. But Star Trek V suffered from a couple of things. Not the director. I don't often, you know, speak glowingly of Mr. Shatner, but it certainly was not as a consequence of the direction that the film didn't fall together, but fell apart. But it did have to do with the script. It did have to do with the budget. I think they had initially budgeted more money for the story and with a more dynamic ending. And then they got into shooting, and not unlike Star Trek I, they found themselves painted into a corner. They didn't know how to resolve the story with the budget that they had. So they ended up with a climax that really wasn't a climax. It did not have that coming together of all the elements and a sense of, you know, a dynamic sense of drama at the end of the story. But as I say, that had more to do with the budget and the way the story was conceived initially.
Last week, a question I wanted to ask Michelle for Star Trek 4, but we couldn't get to it, was about let's just say she likes to talk. I don't think I asked her any questions, now that but I was a good mic stand. You and Michelle had an interesting scene in 4 where you were talking to people on the street, you know, and as I understand there was a hidden camera involved. Didn't people recognize you? I mean, was that, how did that all work out, I guess?
Well, it wasn't really a hidden camera. They set up, you know, quite obviously to shoot the scene. They hired many extras. Some of them were professional and some of them were amateur. And they just had them walk back and forth, and it was sort of an improvised scene. I would go up to people and ask them if they knew where the nuclear vessels were. And so the scene was just worked, it was spontaneous. There was one young lady who was not a member of the hired extras, and she just kind of walked into the scene with a little dog, And everybody had been instructed, to sort of ignore us, but she actually stopped and said, well, I think Alameda is across the bay or something. And that worked. That was very serendipitous, it just happened to work. It was a coming together of elements that made the scene fresh and spontaneous and humorous.
In that film, and obviously you just referenced your famous line, which of the films did you feel that had a most realized role for yourself, for Chekhov? You appeared in 7 of the feature films. Which is the one that you feel most enriched by, I guess?
No question, it was Star Trek 4. I mean, Chekhov had his own music. When he's running through the ship, there's a whole, Russian thing going on. Yeah, it was great fun for me. I really felt a part of that film, and I felt that I was making a substantial contribution. You could argue that in 5 of the 7 films that I was in, I was sort of just there, riding the coattails of Star Trek's great popularity. But certainly in Star Trek 4, there was stuff that was written, and it was indigenous to character. It wasn't a grocery list of dialogue that anybody could have said. Chekhov's lines could only be said by Chekhov, as were for the other folks as well. So that made me feel like I was, that made me feel important to the production, and made me feel that I was earning my keep on that picture. I had a really, and of course we shot on location, so I had a really good time. So I'm looking at his watch.
You weren't supposed to see that. Now.